This is Felix Cavaliere from the Rascals, and you're listening to the Talking Blues.
You have been really busy. I look at what's going to happen this year for you, and for this to happen this year, like your book, like your tour, like your album, which we'll get into more deeply. But obviously, you have been busy during the pandemic.
Thank goodness. Thank goodness for internet and for, available kind of programs such as Logic and Cubase because, this has been quite a spell for all of us, just to have to stay at home. It's tough. So this has been a real godsend that I can do music and, podcasts and writing and collaborations online.
Did the book come out of... So we should say you have a book called Memoir of a Rascal.
Right.
Coming out March 22nd.
Right.
Did the writing of the book precede the pandemic, or did it happen because of the pandemic?
Quick story. The Rascals, the original Rascals, did a Broadway show called Once Upon a Dream, 2013. It was in Broadway. It was very interesting because while we were doing that, we did press conferences. And the four members would be asked questions. Everyone had a different answer for the same question. It's as if I wasn't even there. I mean, it's just so interesting because I think world history could take a lesson from this because I'm not sure what really happened, when, and where. That's when I decided to write something because I said, it's not right that, at least let my views or thoughts or recollections be documented. That's how it started.
So that would have been a few years ago. So this would have been pre-pandemic.
Correct.
What did you learn about yourself in going through the process of writing about your life story?
Well, I got a tremendous admiration for people who write books because it was really a lot of work. And when it's an autobiography type, I mean, I know all these stories. I've been there, done that. And I started with a sort of like a ghostwriter, and unfortunately that didn't work out too well because he was a journalist, and I didn't want it to be sounding like a journal, like an article. I wanted it to be sound like a narration. So that's what took me so much time is to kind of like find someone else that could help me do that. But I noticed the process of recollection and memories. It's difficult because as we go through life, all of us, we have ups and we have downs. And I didn't really feel like writing about the downs too much. I just didn't want to feel like, in other words, we had a fantastic group. I mean, wonderful, wonderful group. We had a fantastic career. However, the negative part of that relationship is sort of like a divorce would be,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So I said, well, should I tell about the divorce? I really went through a big struggle not to have to go through those things. That's what I learned about is that I would rather accentuate the positive. I mean, there's been a few songs written like that rather than the negative. However, I don't know. We'll see what the public thinks.
Did anything surprise you about the journey of looking back?
No, it didn't really surprise me. It's just as I say, you go through life. Uh, I studied for many years with a guru from India. Swami Satchidananda, who was the gentleman who opened up Woodstock Festival, and he used to tell us, if you don't want to be disappointed, don't make any appointments. And that's what I took from it because I'm a little disappointed. I'm disappointed in my fellow bandmates from those days. I just don't like the sort of like I hate to say the ending of the story, but the latter years of the story, they're not exactly what I was hoping. From our wonderful career.
Because you accomplished so much in such a short period of time.
Yeah, it
and
was
it's
really a short period of time that the band was together for sure. Yeah, 5 years really was the tenure because in those days the requirements were much stricter than they became. In other words, we meaning the people from the '60s, we did 2 albums a year approximately, whereas later as the artists became more powerful, let's say. They did one album every 2 or 3 years. So we worked pretty darn hard, and pretty darn fast.
and certainly left your mark with such great songs that
Well, thank you.
still
Yeah, well,
stand the
that's the
test
good
of
luck
time.
part of it. That's really the part you can't predict, and I'm very thankful for that because it's been really wonderful, really great.
Okay, I want to go back to those songs in a bit, but can we start at the beginning? Because I know you initially started playing, well, you were trained as a classical pianist, or you got classical
Correct.
training. Tell me
Correct.
about how much that classical training means to you today and what it meant to you as a musician.
Well, it means that I learned my craft, and I learned my craft correctly. From the so-called musical theory, as well as proper positioning for your hands, and it is also very good for people to, if you study music, and you have to memorize pieces. It's good for your brain. It expands different places that like you don't get with video games. So I'm very thankful about having that. My mom, rest her soul, she really wanted this to happen for me. She was very uh, adamant about me pursuing the talent that God had given me, and I had 3 lessons a week for 8 years of my life, from the age of 5 till approximately she passed when I was 13. So I really feel that the foundation that you have from music training, I think classical music training especially, is really responsible for me being able to do what I did.
You kind of got into jazz a little bit later
Yeah,
on, maybe even with the Rascals, but
yeah.
would the classical training have been very helpful for that direction?
No, not really, because the strictness of classical gets in the way of the creativity of jazz. Jazz is just creation. It's just creating around, like whatever's going through your mind and your soul at that time comes out in your instrument. Whereas classical is this is what Mr. Bach wrote. This is what you play. And I learned that the hard way because my teacher in those days used to get on my case for making any change whatsoever. You put the left hand down at a little different time from the right hand because it sounds a little echoey, and you get criticized because that's not what Mr. Bach wanted. And that's one of the reasons why the shift for me was really important, because I always felt I have to create something. I don't know why. Just that's part of me.
Where does rock or pop fall into that? Because in some ways you have the ability to go anywhere, like jazz. But when you have the songs that you've written, which is now
Mhm.
etched in everybody's mind, and
Yeah,
and things are just, I mean, they obviously they want to hear certain songs of yours played a certain way. Do
sure.
you feel that restriction? I mean, does it fall closer to classical music than jazz?
Well, in the long run, it's kind of like that. It's very interesting that you say that. But the eh, the freedom, the word freedom, is such an interesting word. And we define it like, for example, in music, as you're as you're speaking, uh, when you become a recording artist and you're putting your product out into the marketplace, there's restrictions on that end. Especially in the '60s, there was many restrictions. Time, number one. There was also always lyrical restrictions, which now seem to have gone by the wayside. We couldn't say, let's spend the night together in those days. And
Right.
now, oh my God. But there's always restrictions. I think that's part of life. You realize, there's a speed limit on your car. You got to wear a seatbelt in your car. I mean, I think restrictions are part of like just that's part of life. But jazz does not really, as a rule, have as many restrictions as the other genres.
Hmm.
You're kind of free, you know, and that's why some of the jazz that's out there, that's like clinical jazz, it's kind of like with a drum machine, and that's not really jazz. Jazz is, there's an interesting story about. I mean, it was told to me about the School of Music in Juilliard. New York City has this phenomenal music school. It's actually it's an acting school. It's a classic school for everything. But they did an experiment. I don't know if this is part of the curriculum today, but I believe it was in the '60s or '70s. What they did is they took all different musical people, different instruments, and put them in one room, and they said, just start playing. Well, there's no music, so you're just playing. And then after a certain period of time, everybody, I believe, starts to listen to one another and gels together, and it becomes like a magical experience. And then it goes right back down to chaos. And I think that's the story of my whole book, right there. You know, the rascal started magical experience and then went down to chaos. So it's really interesting because of the fact that that creative idea. For example, well, I mean, I can speak for a long time on it. I mean, a lot of people do sessions, for example. You play for other people.
Hmm.
Well, I always had trouble playing sessions because I think too much. You know what I mean? Like, don't do it like this. Oh, but how about this? They're if you're playing keyboards for somebody's session, do what they want. Do what you want. So it's just an interesting way of thinking.
It is interesting. When I look at your career, I mean, it almost seems like you were meant to be a musician. From your classical training to joining the doo-wop band
Yeah.
to to all the bands that you went through from Joey D and the Starlighters and then creating your own band. I mean, it just seemed like you were destined to do this.
Really interesting that you say that because that's exactly what happened. I had absolutely no idea that I was going to be a musician. And I when I used to speak a lot at various music schools, and I would tell the students, like I had no idea. I was in pre med. I was really coming from a medical family, and I started a band well, I started actually in high school, but I ended up with a band in college. I took a summer off. I went to work in the Catskill Mountains, and I never came back. You know, the way things happen. I mean, the story, as you said, is in the book. It's an interesting story because it took me to Europe, and it took me with Joey D and the Starlighters. Uh, the story is that pretty much this band called the Beatles opened up for Joey in Europe. No one knew the Beatles yet, and that was kind of like the kind of like event that made me decide, wow, I think I can do this. This looks like fun. I think I'll try it. I had no idea, so I really just never went back. To finish my pre med. So I had no idea.
But did you not have regional success with a song called the Syracuse?
Not really. That was just a local product. It was Uh, it, wa- you know, it, I don't know. It actually sold more after the Rascals became known than it ever did in that area. It was a record company, a very local thing up there in Syracuse. I had a blast doing it the first time, and but it really was a successful, monetary situation.
So tell me about seeing the Beatles in those days
Oh
and
yeah,
thinking, I mean, they were opening up for you, so obviously
right.
your band was a headliner. But what did you see about them that made you think this is something worth pursuing?
Well, first of all, you walk into in those days a club, you know, and chaos is there. I use that word again. I mean, people are screaming and like, I mean, his not a normal scream, not a normal, it's kind of like almost like, oh, I just it just felt like they were hysterical. And of course, that in itself was unique, you
Hmm.
know. it really was as if there was a God forbid a fire in the room or something. They were just really going at it, you know. Second of all, I see these people on stage with long hair, and I never saw anybody with long hair. Females maybe, but not males. So what I could hear of the music, as a when musicians hear music, it goes into a different kind of like calculus place in your brain. Well, I tell you what, when they play American songs, the so-called Chuck Berrys, they're okay. I mean, they were all right. I really thought they were more of a singing group than a playing group. I wasn't that enamored with their playing. And then they played their songs, and their songs struck a real chord because they were so interesting. I mean, just little ways that they kind of changed their rhythmic structure. Like in other words, dun 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 dun. Dun. I want to hold. It was just cool. You know, little did we know that these musical geniuses were about to take over the entire planet. But you heard something. You said, like, oh, so is that what they're screaming about? Wow. And then they did "Love Me Do," and they did, things that everybody knew. Not that many months afterwards, they came to the United States, and so everybody knew what I was hearing. But it was fascinating. So when they did their thing, wow.
But I wonder, in your mind, is that what you wanted to be, or did you have something else in mind? And already you had experience of touring Europe, and you had,
A little bit. That was the beginning. That was one of the first shows.
yeah.
I just had gotten there. I had a little experience. I mean, basically, my experience was working, in fraternity parties and weddings and bar mitzvahs and clubs in either Syracuse or in my hometown of Pelham. You know, uh, Limited experience, but I had talent shows, things like that. But as far as a career in music, that was never really something that I had really envisioned for a number of reasons. And prior to Led Zeppelin coming to America, the monetary kind of reimbursement for being a musician was not that great. I mean, if you were looking for, I came from a fairly middle class life, and the bar was pretty high for me to achieve what my dad and people did. It was, you know, that kind of money was not available in the music business yet to many. And so it never looked like a career. I mean, now you can join a music school and really get a heck of an education for you know coming into this world. And there's a lot of answers to that question, but no,
Mhm.
it was kind of like destiny. It really was destiny. There's no question about it. I was going back to school as far as I knew.
Even when you had the hits.
Well, no, before that,
Okay,
before,
okay.
yeah, before that. Prior to that, there was a couple of things that deterred me. I mean, like I was looking at the organization that I was with, which I used the term loosely. Joey D's organization was not exactly like it wasn't like a very corporate structure. Let me put it like that. That's the kindest way I can say these guys are crazy. And it wasn't until I came back to the United States with them, and we worked, and I was exposed to Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, that I realized, there's a structure here. Frankie was always a very astute businessman. No fooling around with Frankie, man. I mean, I saw it from the dressing room, like this. He's got it together. And this was a long time ago. This was way before the Broadway show and all that. But I saw that there are some people in this business. With all due respect to Joey, I mean, I love him. He's become a dear friend of mine. But the structure that I saw was so much more efficient, and so much more intelligently run in terms of this is a business. This is not a playground. You don't, like I say, it's advertised, like, oh, rock and roll, all that. But it's a business. If you want to make a living at a business, you better have it together. You know what I mean? Because it's easy to just, there's thousands of stories about people spending all of their money before they even break up. So it was a journey. It was an interesting journey.
So I read somewhere that by the time you did your first album, that you had talked Atlantic Records into making sure that you had creative control or you were behind the
Right.
production of it with the
Well,
help of.
actually, it was prior to us even recording because that was they were the only label that would allow us to do that. We even turned down Phil Spector, who was one of my, talk about idols. I mean, I loved this man's work. I mean, he was so brilliant. No, we didn't go with Phil. We didn't go with Columbia. We didn't go with RCA. But Atlantic said, "We'll give you creative control. You can produce yourselves." The gift that they gave us with that, besides giving us free studio time, which I'll always be thankful for. Give me a laboratory to work in that, like, oh my goodness. They gave us two gentlemen, Tom Dowd and Arif Mardin. These were gifts because of the fact that they were so good at what they did in the studio. And I'm talking about from an engineering point of view, from a creative point of view, certainly from a musical point of view. It's like the Beatles had George Martin. We had Arif Mardin. It was such a joy working with somebody of that ilk, somebody that had that encyclopedic knowledge of music at every level. Uh, I'm talking about from Middle Eastern music, which of course he was brought up in, to classical, to jazz, to big band. So it was just a gift having those two gentlemen, at least in the beginning. And Arif stayed on, for a while. He stayed on until we left the label. So all of those things contributed to it being like a wonderful experience.
But I know that you had experience recording because you had a single before then. But how much
Right.
studio experience did you have when you went in with Atlantic?
Not very much.
But you knew what sound you wanted for your band?
I knew what sound I wanted. I did not know how to get it. From an engineering point of view or from a production point of view. I knew. See, my premise was this: look, the people were accepting us because of what they heard from the stage. So, in other words, if you're signing us for that purpose, then let me reproduce it. Let's not change it. You know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And just give me a chance to do that. I ran into a little bit of difficulty with my band because I don't know. I guess they didn't think we could do it. I knew I could do it. You know what I mean? I just knew. You like this? Where did you hear this on disc? You know, because I had an idea. I had a concept. It may have been all in my mind, but you know, it was a good concept. You know what I mean? The organ played a major part in it. It became like and my premise was this from the beginning. When I heard the Beatles, I said, "Look, how about if I get the best singers I can find, the best musicians I can find, put them together, and I had an idea of a sound, just simple idea, very simple, based around, like good musicians, good voices, good songs, and an organ filling the gaps. And it worked. We had a deal in 6 months from inception. 6 months, and we were already on Atlantic. So it was pretty fast.
But I wonder how being good on stage, which I presume was the your reputation initially more than anything
Hmm.
else, how
Yes.
that translated into radio success. Because I get the impression that radio success or having a hit single is not necessarily the same thing as being a great band.
Well, no, because as I say, there's certain parameters that you have to attain to do that, and there's a lot of business involved. I don't want to in other words, like you have there's a lot that goes into making a song a hit on a radio
Hmm.
station. Today, that is magnified by maybe six zeros.
Right.
Yeah, it's a big deal to get on a radio station today.
But
It wasn't
initially,
that.
was it your goal to say, okay, we're going to go in and record a hit single?
Well, that's the goal that Atlantic Records wanted. I don't know that I don't know that I ever had any goals like that. I just wanted to make music. And what was the path? Well, the path was to get a record deal, which is kind of like really changed today. It's evolved into a whole different thing. Well, I can do it on my own. I can put it online. There was nothing like that.
Mm.
We don't have these outlets. So the normal path was to go through a record company to get on the radio, to have a hit record, et cetera, et cetera. That was the path. So that's the path, that we went on. We tried out.
And pretty quickly you had a big hit with Good Lovin'.
Oh yeah, which was amazing. Was our second record. You know, Prior to that, we did not write for ourselves because that was not accepted in the clubs that we were working in. There was 21 and over in those days, and the proprietors they really didn't want to hear anything that was original. Their whole purpose in life was to make money from people drinking. So
Right.
you know they wanted to keep the people satisfied and dancing and drinking, and top 40 would be the genre that they were looking for, to have people come in because you could reproduce what was on the radio that they were hearing. They really weren't interested in any kind of like aesthetic, you know creation of talent, you know, like Leonard Cohen or anybody like that. They just wanted to get you, which is cool. I understand it. I mean, a friend of mine wrote a song called "It's Not the Money, It's the Money." That's what it's about. I understand that. You
Did
know.
did the success of Good Lovin' surprise you?
Oh, really? Absolutely. I mean, it surprised us with the meteoric rise of a song that you put out that becomes number one. But I mean, it didn't surprise me in that, when you play live for people, you get an instant reaction. We always got a instant reaction to that song. You could see when people request it. You could see when they jump up and dance, and you could just tell, that's a hit. But the extent of the hit, no idea.
Okay, so now you have the success, and now you also take on writing your own songs.
Right.
How easy is that? Or not,
That's not
at
easy.
that point, had you written much on your own?
Well, I had written, I always was creating, putting that to the recording process. No, I had not. I had not done very much. I'd done those songs up in Syracuse, because I didn't have the outlet for it and I didn't have the studio for it. But I always was creating songs. I was always, it's just something that really I always enjoyed, and that's one of the reasons that I moved to Nashville all these years later, because I just like creating. I like that newness of something that, oh wow, I just look, isn't this great? I love this. Hopefully other people will. Yeah,
Right.
that's the part you really should never suppress. In human being, when you want to, my wife, for example, is a decorator. She's a painter. She's an artist, and she's really not happy unless she's doing that. So we've got to find outlets for people to do that.
So between the years of 66 and 69, like
Right.
you're churning out a lot of hits.
Yeah.
And this is from somebody who hadn't written a lot of songs, but
Yeah.
did you do you get to a point where you think I know how to write a hit when you have that many hits?
Well, to me, there's so many answers to that question. But you know, uh, I became even more of a spiritual person at that time.
Can I ask how
Like,
that how why was the spirituality such a
I,
big thing in your life?
well, first of all, I inherited it from my family. My mom, she was really religious. Second of all, I searched out and I was lucky enough to find this guru. Third of all, are you kidding me? We write a song, I have a friggin' hit. Wait a minute, what's going on here? Something is happening that's very, very, very divine. Is the only word I can say. Are you kidding me? We write a song, it's a hit, it's a hit, it's a hit. I became very kind of, I don't know, connected. I don't even know the right word, but I said, this is very cool. And I had a lot of reasons to, believe that something was really special here. Rather than saying, "Wow, look at me, man, I'm batting 1,000." You know what I'm saying? I knew there was something very powerful going on through me or through us or however you want to use that equation. I just felt that. I felt that happening.
Does having all those hits Is there a negative to that?
Well, the only negative is you got to do it again.
Hmm.
That's the only negative because you hear about these artists that have a huge album, a huge hit, and then they have that sophomore fall. You know, following "Good Lovin'" was not easy. And the bottom line is that that happens to a lot of people with success. Now you got to do it again and again and again, and that's the only negative of it. Other than that, there's no negative. It's just a blast.
And
You think about it. You have an idea, you put that idea down on, in those days, tape. People love it. They request it. They sing it. It sells. It makes money. I mean, what is there something to complain about there? I don't know. Perhaps, but I haven't found it yet.
okay, so you write these songs and many hits. Like as I
Yeah.
said, during that 3 year period, maybe even 4 year period, you were on the charts more than you were not.
Yes.
And beyond that, there are some songs that are so classic
Yeah.
that I mean they're it's not fair to say they're just as big today, but they have taken on something else, a totally different meaning today, and
Yeah.
they're
Wonderful album.
timeless.
Sure. Yeah.
Does when you write songs like that, does it surprise you that some songs don't reach that status while others did?
No, it doesn't surprise me because of the second part of that word, music business. See, it's not just the music. There's a business involvement here. And if those songs don't get the treatment, so to speak, like if they're just part of an album, you know what I'm saying, rather than a single, it's kind of hard for them to get into the marketplace. I mean, Beatles are certainly an exception. I mean, my God, everything they did was just magical, hit. But not too many people can do that, and it's it's also, like, for example, when as the business started to get really crowded with artists, when everybody thought this was the coolest thing to do, let me become a songwriter. Now you've got 8 zillion songs, coming into the radio programmer's desk. Now you get into a pecking order. For example, like if during the '80s when I started to try to do a solo career, I would have people come up to me from the radio stations, and they would say, "Well, who should I push out of the rotation to put you in? Should I push Marvin Gaye out, Luther Vandross out, Whitney Houston out? Cindy, who should I push out? Somebody has to go if you're going to come in." And that's the problem. So because there's only so many seats in the church, I mean, that's it. It's full. You know, there's so many variables between writing a song, releasing a song, having a hit, that I don't even know how people get hits anymore. Unless they purchase airtime.
And were you always conscious of trying to create a hit? Because I mean, I look at some of your albums
Yeah.
in the later days, and you had gospel tunes, you had soul tunes,
Mm,
you had blues
mm,
tunes, you had pop tunes, you had a drum solo, you had jazz tunes. Like when I think of that, like when I think
yeah.
of the Freedom Suite album
Right.
and just the vastness of the musicality on that album,
Mm,
was it? But were you conscious of having to have hits, which you did, but the fact that
right.
you could do a lot more and go to different places?
Well, yeah. This is a question that has come up. Like, for example, when I produce artists, you know, uh, this is a question that comes up when you have a group. You know, if I was a solo artist those years, I wouldn't have had anybody giving me pressure to have hits. The record company puts pressure, obviously, because they've got a inception of cash going in, injection of cash going into your career. They would like to get it back, you know. So yeah, they put that onus on you. This is a very, very common thing with artists. I'm sure you've heard it a
Hmm.
thousand times. Is you know, we want the hits, we want the hits, we want the hits, we want the hits. That's put on you, and then there's always paying rent. I mean, let's face it. I mean, you But being in a group makes it a little inhibits you a little bit with your with your kind of like exposure creativity wise and what are you doing here, and that kind of thing. And there's so many answers to that question. As the years went by, I was asked, and I produced a lady by the name of Laura Nero,
Hmm.
and
Two albums,
a lot
correct?
yeah, yeah, and a wonderful relationship for her whole, it's just my whole being, I adored her. She did not give a damn if she sold a record. But I don't meet too many artists like that. She didn't care if I mean, it wasn't even that she was wealthy because she became well, but she just she didn't have that gene wasn't in her to make a dollar, you know. So when you worked with her, it was interesting because some of us would like to make a dollar, you know what I mean? I mean, it's so Arif and I produced one of the albums with her. She was just the purest artist I've ever met in my life. But most people, they have that, whether it's ego or, whether it's need or whether it's group effort, that, you've got to satisfy the record company, number one, whether you like it or not, otherwise you can go on your own. I mean, I've had this conversation many, many times with people and with record artists. I mean, with record label owners, you know, we don't want any sermons here. We want hits. Gotcha. Gotcha. I understand.
But you were able to do more than just hits. I mean, you were able to
Yeah,
provide hits, but also
right,
go to many different
right.
places.
Yeah, I know, but there was always pressure on. I mean, a lot of times we would do songs, for example, and the record company would not want to put them out. And these stories have become legendary. Like people got to be free. They didn't want that out. They thought, you're shaking, you're rattling the cage here. Don't do it. Grooving was another one, even though it was just the fact that we didn't have a drum on it. We had conga,
Hmm.
instead of kit, trap kit. They have their own opinions, and that's really what makes the world go around, because I'm sure there's many books written about all of the rejections that labels have given to various, million selling artists. No one knows exactly what it is, to create a hit, and that's what makes the world go round.
So when you leave the band, when the band ends and you become a solo artist,
Mm.
does your approach to music change greatly, or are you still the same person, just playing it, doing more things that you want to do on your own?
Yes. Yeah, it was a big part of my life to, I really never wanted to go on as a solo artist. I was very content to have a group, um, although it was a dysfunctional group toward the end, and so it wasn't much fun, But there's a big difference, There's a big difference, as I mentioned, you got the pressers, and you've also got a camaraderie when you go out on the road with a bunch of people that like are all trying to make it. It's fun. It's really interesting. When you go on by yourself, it's not as much fun. It's a whole different thing. From a musical point of view, yeah, it changed a lot. It changed because well, I didn't have I had a different set of tools with me. Uh, for a while, I had my drummer Dino with me, but I was able to implement and bring in more people than just the four of us. See, we prided ourselves with being the musicians that played on the sessions when we made our records. The only difference there was I was originally playing bass on the organ bass, and as the sound quality improved, due to, like, technology, we brought in a bass player by the name of Chuck Rainey, who probably was the best thing that ever happened to us because he was phenomenal. And then so we had an addition of bass players initially,
Mm.
but we didn't bring anybody else in unless we brought in someone to do a solo. I mean, it was a whereas, a lot of the groups, the Beach Boys, et cetera, they didn't play their own songs. I mean, they so we prided ourselves with that. But when the group broke up, that was no longer there. So I could expand and really, really bring in some real ringers, man. And these are people who I loved and admires. I mean, there was a gentleman by the name of Ralph McDonald who, you know, was not only a phenomenal percussionist, but he also wrote with Bill Withers some of those big songs that he had. and wow, just having him in the room, and Alice Coltrane, we brought her into the room, and you know, we were able to I was able to really spread out, you know, and again, there's a big difference.
Did you ever think about restarting a different band?
Well, we did at the time because what happened was so it was unpredictable. I mean, we were uh, we were what you call free agents,
Right.
going from Atlantic Records to Columbia Records, and which was a major move for us because the fact that Atlantic had just become Warner Brothers not that long. So in every country, certainly in Europe and in Asia, we had a different record company. Columbia was Columbia all over the world. That was a major, major step for us. It would have been if we had been able to continue. So I was really excited about having an international label, rather than a national one and being, like I say it as a joke, but it's not a joke, being, ripped off in every country of the world, because you had no control over all these little labels that we were with. I mean, that's just how it was. But when Eddie left, which was the real, was exactly like, one of your tires going left and the rest of your car going right. It was at the it was literally at the contract signing. We were totally unprepared for continuation, without him. I had to scramble, really had to scramble, and put something together. The Columbia people, they really, I won't say they didn't care, but they didn't blink. They gave us this contract anyway. So
Hmm.
now it was up to me and us to fulfill the, contract had certain, things you have to provide, such as, albums. It was quite it was a major, major, major event, in my psyche as well as, in our career. Because wow, what do you mean you're quitting? Where you going? Is there some place you want to do a solo album? No, no, I just want to go home. Okay. All right. Well, what do we do here? You know, well, regroup. Let's get it back together. Let's get out there and do something.
I was also curious when you went in as the sorry, as the Rascals, but they made you
Uh-huh.
change the name to the Young
Correct.
Rascals
Yeah,
because of
exactly.
the Young
Yeah.
Harmonicas or something.
Excuse
The
me.
Harmonica Rascals or whatever.
That's right. Yeah.
Um, when you changed it back to the Rascals, was there any concern about changing your name from the Young
I'm sure
Rascals?
there was, but I didn't care. I was really angry about the fact that our manager didn't ask us about the word young. You know, name a name. It's kind of naming your child. I mean, you name a child, you take a lot of time picking a name. And we had a name, and then somebody put in the word young, and there was a connotation around that I tell as a joke now because I've learned to accept my past. But people would come up and say, "Did that little dog have a circle around his eye, or was that painted on?" I don't know if you're aware of that, the Little
Yeah,
Rascals.
yeah.
We never escaped that. And oh no, we're not the Little Rascals, man. We're the Rascals, damn it. And oh boy, it happened without our we didn't even know the manager changed the name. So sure there was, I'm sure, like, some people it would say it was a bad business move to change the name.
But it didn't seem to affect you. I mean, you continue to have hits, and
No, listen, we're so lucky because thank God we had good music because we did everything wrong.
does anybody do
Yes, we
everything
did
right
everything
though?
wrong. Yeah, so the music, thank goodness, saved us.
What was it like working with Steve Cropper? And and once again, you hit the radio chart working with him. Did you
Oh
know?
yeah. Well, that's what's nice about Nashville. There's a kind of like a real easy relationship here with people when it comes to writing. You just meet somebody, and of course, I knew Steve for many years from the Stacks. Matter of fact, his people there, Booker T. They cut grooving. They cut a instrumental version of grooving. They heard the song in the studio, and they said, "Wow, we're going to put an instrumental out." So I've known him for years. Writing with him was fun. I mean, it was interesting in the respect that, uh, you know, I I kind of embrace technology. I mean, I have reasons for that, which go back to my father. the dentist, because I used to say to him, when you retire, this equipment is going to the Smithsonian. You know what I mean? It's not new. You know, so I always had a desire to be up to date. Steve's not like that. When I brought the computer technology to the studio, with the loops and you know, eh, it was like, oh my goodness, it was a big, big, big uh, interference with his norm. But I just love it. I see people. I did an album in the '90s prior to with Steve Cropper with a young gentleman from a young guy from England. He came in and did a few songs. It was Don Was his production at that time. And I remember, I wrote this song and I was writing it, and he said to me, he says, "Okay, have you got something to do for a few hours?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Oh, I like to fiddle with this." He had one of those Akai MP3 things, or MPs, those. He put together everything in this little box, and and I said, "Oh my God, are you kidding me?" I mean, this was it was like magic. Well, Steve Steve wasn't like that. He's more old school, So it was fun. It's interesting, you know.
That was a great album, though.
Yeah, it was fun, and you look at the people we had. Chester Thompson on there. I mean, we had that. The Weather Report drummer, Phil Collins. I mean, see, he lives here as well. That's what's nice about Nash. Making music, especially when you don't have that onus on you of wow, making a hit and all that. It's just great. I mean, if you could do that, if you can do that all your life, you're really blessed and lucky. And so I had a good experience with Steve. It was interesting.
Did you ever do anything other than music?
Yeah, I tried other things. I was bored. You know, I got involved in real estate, big deal. I mean, like, wow, this is fun. Wow, God, this is. I mean, it was not for me. You know, no, I just didn't. It's some things interest you and some things don't.
So 2022 is, as I said before, a pretty special year in that you've already won the recipient of the Free Speech Music Award.
Yeah, yeah, that was
You
interesting.
have a new book that we talked about that's coming out.
Right,
Sorry, at the end of this month. It's actually going to
right.
be coming out. It came out 2 days before this will air. So
Excellent,
yeah, so
excellent.
it just came out. You're going on the Legends live tour with Mickey Dolenz,
Right,
and you have a new album called Then and Now coming out. Tell me about the new
correct.
album.
Well, we came up with this idea. Uh, I think my manager had something to do with it. He said, "Why don't you take 5 songs that inspired your life, career, re-record them, and write 5 new ones that shows that type of thread." So we did, and I took songs like, for example, "Higher and Higher," by Jackie Wilson, and "Spanish Harlem" by Benny King. Songs that really, they sang to me. And there's so many that we could do 10 albums like this,
Hmm.
and we re-recorded them, and we wrote new songs, and then again, as you said that earlier, the pandemic hit, but I was able to continue them through the online recording process, which was good because it was different. But just like we're zooming now, or we're doing this podcast, and we're able to do this. So again, had a blast because it came out pretty good. It came out excellent, and we're going to get that out there, and uh, just keep going. I mean, like I say, one of the interesting things about the book, which I should mention, if people are hearing it, they can go to FelixCavalieremusic.com and get on the list, or we're having autographed copies in advance, or but you know I thought I had stopped the book a few years back, and then I realized, wow, there's a lot happening this year. I better add another chapter. Oh, I better add another chapter. So we had to stop it. So I don't want to stop. I really don't want to stop. I really want to keep going. And, I've traveled the world, with my music, and I love it.
Let me ask you one final question. When you write the songs that you have written, and once again, these are classics, these are parts of our soundtrack of our lives.
Mm.
Tell me about the relationship you have with the songs that you've written.
Well, they're all. I mean, seriously, it's like they're children. They're little children there. Of yours that you have. You know, prodigies. The songs have meaning to other people, and I don't know. I have one story that I've been repeating. I mean, obviously, the people got to be free uh, now in 2022 with this horror that's going on in our world. That really resonates right back to me as well. I mean, like, wow, do you think people have to be free? I mean, are you kidding me? This is so sad what's going on now in Ukraine. I mean,
Hmm.
it's a perfect example of what we don't really want to have. Well, sure, that song right now, every time I play it, even more of a meaning. So, I I I feel that, and then I'm on my way to Hawaii in June, which the Rascals were huge in Hawaii, and that's where I wrote "Beautiful Morning." So when I go out there, "Beautiful Morning" is going to be, right there, right on my list. We wrote a song called "My Hawaii," which was really, really number one in Hawaii. You know, it's just when you travel around the world, like I went to Japan, and I had such a great time over there because I don't have to tell you how the people love music. They love music. And one young guy came up to me, and said, "I want to be your son." You know, come on. I mean, you can't beat this. Are you kidding me? Somebody loves you like that.
Yeah, for
What do you
sure.
say? You know? So you see the joy that you bring to people, and it's through the songs. And some songs bring more than others. I understand, and that's what we feel coming back. We feel that on stage. You feel that, yeah. I love you. I love you. I love you. Come on, that you could complain about that. I mean, seriously, you can't. As long as that's there, I want to do it.
Do you still get the same joy out of writing songs these days?
Yeah, yeah, I really like writing songs. I like the newness of it. The new idea. Oh, wow, never heard that before. And there's something that's exciting about newness. That yeah, it's different from well, this is a this one has been around for many many years. But how about this one? And you have to keep that kind of joy and faith in what you're doing. They're not all great. I mean, obviously, but you think they are. you know.
But there must be others that you've written that you think are so amazing that might not have the hit status, but means
Yeah,
a
well,
lot to you.
that's a different thing. Today hit status is it's almost an impossible word. I mean, there's so many variables now between you and that word.
Hmm.
Oh God, yeah, it's I like when, like, for example, there was a movie out a few years back, that just only had internet on publicity. I think it was like something like it was like a one camera kind of thing, and it went out there and just it was viral. I mean, that's the thread, because I don't know if that exists much anymore. Certainly not without the internet. I had a neighbor here. I moved to Franklin, Tennessee, and this neighbor across the street from me, he was kind of like he was a Christian artist, and he was an interesting guy. His name was Bob Carlyle. And our children used to play together, and he had invited me over to his house one time. He says, "Felix, would you come over? I got a song I want to play for you. My wife wants me to put it on an album. I don't want to put it on an album." And he played this song for me, and I had four daughters. Tears were in my eyes. I'm listening to things. He says, "Oh my God, that's great." Well, it turned out to be a multi-million seller called Butterfly Kisses. And the reason it did is because some disc jockey on Mother's Day saw it, heard it on an album, and just said, "This is," and it just spread from that all the way to Oprah Winfrey's television show. If that still exists, it's really tough to get that to happen anymore because of all the Live Nation and Clear Channel. I mean, their playlists are all the same now all over the United States. I mean, it used to be, you went to New Orleans, you heard that music. You went to California, you heard Beach Boys, you heard Birds. No, it's all the same now. It's all been homogenized. The same stores are in the malls, et cetera, et cetera. But if that could still happen, I'm keeping writing.
Well, I hope you do. Thank
There
you
you
so
go.
much for
Thank
doing
you.
this, and thank you for all the great music.
Hey, Michael, thank you, man. I really enjoyed your conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.